Roman, it is awesome to have you back, and I'm excited to dig into your PhD that has now been published. I know we were talking about it at the end of last show, but before we dig into that, I'm curious, what does the researcher do for your own training when it comes to the foot and ankle? How does that go about in your own practice?
Yeah, hi Joel. Thanks for the invitation for I would say the part two. So now the job is done. I finished my PhD, so I can talk about all the results. Well, that's really a good question, and in regards to I would say the protocol that we created for this PhD, I would say that all the exercise first came from my own training, just that I really like, to go much more into details around foot ankle biomechanic research. And I have some kind of idea looking at research and say, okay, I can try to create this one, or if you put the tools like that, or if you have this position, etc. And one of my philosophy I've as a rehab coach is also, to I would say be able to do all the exercise that I can give to your athletes. Also because you understand a little bit the feeling and the intensity or the way that you have to do it. So I would say that's all things was part of my idea of training and many things. And if we go back to, for example, the foot bridge and put just two bricks and put the foot here
Yeah.
came during the COVID lockdown. I was, at home like everyone, and I was just in my garden, and I have to kind of break from a old wall, and just I was in barefoot and just put my foot on that. And I remember that I was just reading a book, so not was very concentrated on the exercise, but just do some balance on one leg and read a book on two big. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel something around my arch, and I say, oh, it could be great, and etc. So I would say that a lot of things come from doing research, reading research, and that gave me some idea. And this summer, for example, I profiling my calf on my own, so just evaluating many parameters from my calf, both legs. So I would say reactive strengths, capacities, and maxima strengths, both in knee flexion, knee extended position. And I start to just build my own program for in 4 weeks, just 2 sessions. And so that's also one of example that I can give to my courses, just train on my own and to see how I can change my own, weaknesses, because this is not all your athletes that have some weaknesses, and to work also on that, to understand what it is also to train hard the calf. For example, it was my goal during the summer, and etc. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of foot training potential ideas sitting in anyone's garden. I would like there was rocks when I moved into this house that I'm in 5 years ago. I would walk around outside and I'd find like an interesting rock and stand on it and think, oh, like this feels interesting to put my foot this way on this rock. And then the bricks is interesting as well. I know Darian Barr, who's been on the show many times, has been very much into bricks for training the foot. I would usually see him use it more for forefoot like applications where you would cut a brick in half and just have the front arch or the balls of the feet on the brick and then doing different manipulations. That's so cool that you have that midfoot application. So like the heels on one brick and the forefoot's on another brick, and you would stand on that for however long.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think now it's maybe also because everyone asks me about, how do you know, or I can have you incline plate? you bricks, you etc. So actually, I have so many idea of object, you know, that I can build because I build with my father so many little custom made things for foot and ankle training. And yeah, I think it's good idea. Maybe in the future, it's maybe to create a kind of company where I build all my idea where you can have, you know, the things for the first ray, the things for the third foot, the things for the might foot, the things for the mobility, and etc. So I would say that's um, the greatness of our job is that there is no good or I would say or bad exercise. There is just some parameter that you really have to focus on, but you can really have different kind of way of targeting things. The the big thing is just that uh, it's at the end you have the same effect. I would say it's not that we don't care or we move from A to B. It's just that we can have so many different things. Also, it's cool to have different kind of exercise for um, you athletes, you know, kind of preference because athlete A w- doesn't like you exercise or this exercise and prefer to do the other one, and etc. So it's cool also to have a kind of, you know, variety of your own exercise also, and not just having one or two exercise also.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very common that like a foot exercise will come out and that everyone just thinks, oh, everyone, this is the gold standard, this one foot exercise, and everyone should be doing, or this isometric, and that should be like this standard that we all do. But I know last time we talked about the forefoot dominance or midfoot exercises. Um, and or intrinsic foot versus more that calf. And I want to get into that today as well. The one thing before I ask you about your research and the studies and the findings there, because I really am excited to unpack that in depth today. I think at the end of last podcast, we might have spent 3 or 5 minutes talking about it. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you with the bricks though about like the sensation, just because I think that's something that we don't that's one of those more subtle things that maybe we don't talk about in more the research, the more mathematical sense so much. Like being barefoot on bricks versus if you just had like a smooth, I don't know, like a box, really smooth box or something. Do you have any thoughts on the texture of the what you're standing on, or like a no slip grip where it's like that rough like sandpaper kind of type feel of what you're standing on? Do you have any thoughts on that with the surfaces that we train on or utilize for anything that's barefoot in nature?
Yeah, that's good question. I think that from a proprioceptive things, we know that the foot and ankle really have the ability to change is biomechanics regarding to the surface that you are in contact with, meaning that if you have damping surface, so something that dissipate energy but not, you know, release it or not give you back, we know that it will increase your foot ankle muscle activity to perform these energetical things. That the same when you run or you when you have some stiffness or springiness of the surface, where we know that if it's help you, your brain will know that, and after your foot and ankle will turn off a little bit, just to have a kind of economic things. But when it came to exercise, I really try to be barefoot as most as I can, just because I like to see also the engagement of the toes or the engagement of the muscle, and I really try so to do it barefoot and also, but um, between, you know, kind of intensity of max intensity and also some discomfort. Sometimes barefoot could be painful or could be not comfortable if it's, you know, the brick, for example, it's too stiff or etc. That's also the preference of the athletes, and so, but for most of the time, I really try to be barefoot during my exercise. So, for example, if we talk about oh, the protocol of my PhD, 98% of the time, all the athletes did the five did the five exercise barefoot here. But yeah, that's always the thing between what you want in terms of thing, what and maybe you can change because of this, yeah, painful things or discomfort. Yeah, I prefer to have, for example, max intensity that you know he push hard, for example, on the ground, etc. Uh, Pain free that barefoot and that's my I would say a philosophy around that, and not always barefoot, but most of the time.
Yeah, so let's dig in then to that PhD research, and I just think it was so interesting to me. I know you talked about it last time, so could you explain, again for those who caught the last podcast, but share about the research, but then let's dig into the results and the training implications for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, the idea was pretty simple. It's just that the foot ankle complex, it's pretty hard and complex in terms of anatomy. So many joint, many muscles, etc. So the idea was just to uh, have a look in the MTP joint. So we can call it the forefoot. So the idea of the PhD was really to, uh, I would say, investigate the role and the function of the forefoot flexion strength. So the strength into flexion. So the role and the function of the strength of the forefoot into the propulsion kinetics and into, I would say, the overall performance during three main tasks, which was sprinting, cutting, and jumping in athletes. So for this PhD, we have three big parts. Number one was created a dynamometer or ergometer that was able to evaluate precisely and validly the strength of the MTP flexion. Number two was a cross-sectional study where we took five athletes, LC and highly trained athletes in five different sports. Evaluate the strengths of their forefoot. Also, some other foot parameters like foot morphological deformation, foot postures, foot ankle reactive strengths, and also the strengths of the calf isometrically and the quadriceps. And after we just perform all the kinetics evaluation, so ground reaction force during two different parts of the acceleration phase and cutting, horizontal cutting, vertical jump, horizontal jump, and after 90 degrees of cutting. So it was cross-sectional, meaning that it's just one time, or I would say two times. So one was familiarization, and after we wanted to know the association or the relationship between MTP flexion strengths and foot parameters in relation to some kinetics. So the kinetics was propulsion kinetics, meaning the impulse, and also the ratio of force. So we also evaluate, I would say, not just the amount of force that you can produce, but also the transmission of force that you can put on the ground. So the direction of the resultant of the 3D forces. And the last part was basically the same evaluation, but was the same evaluation after a protocol of 8 weeks of improving the strength of the forefoot, where we have a control group and a training group. And we have also, so before we have a control period, so just to have a look into the variation and variability of our measurement. So to make sure that when you don't train, or to make sure to see if you don't train, you have a stable, I would say variation, or stable change, on all of your metrics after you have the training of 8 weeks, so 2 sessions per week, and after you have the post-training evaluation, and after we create also the training period. So to understand how it is, or what was the effect of the detraining period around all the parameters. So did, did you have the same strengths, or did you lose because you stopped the protocol? So yeah, so part one, part two, part three was that. So pretty straightforward PhD around a very, precise region of the foot. So just the forefoot. So only exercise around the forefoot, and to see if you have some effects. So that was the goals.
Got it. And then forefoot, like use MTP joint. Is that toe training more so than calf raise based training, or could you explain
Yeah,
the nuances of that?
if you look at our protocols, basically it's all around the MTPS. So meaning that we have, so for the gym session, so it was a session based in the gym. We has a 4-foot MTP flexion, so with a heavy load and etc. And electrical stimulation in supine position. So was exercise 1. Exercise 2 was a heavy load for the first race. So it was I would say an exercise focusing or targeting only the first ray. So it was a first ray push on, I would say, an incline leg curl. So it's just like a soleus kind of position, but you only push on your first, and you want to elevate your heel thanks to the flexion of your first. So it's a heavy load exercise for the first ray. After we have a really kind of incline pogo jump, but pogo really with the forefoot, I would say, interaction with the ground. So really forefoot plyometrics. So this was our 3 exercise in the gym session. So we also increased. So it was also heavy loading plyometric, just meaning that at the end you change the inclination, so to work on much more the lateral part of the forefoot and the medial part of the forefoot. And we also increase the body weight thanks to dumbbells. And after, in regards to the arm session, because we have 2 sessions per week, one was what we call a supervised optimal session, meaning that it was the optimal things where you can have access to materials, being a gym, etc. And the second one was a home session where we just gave to athletes a complex or electrical stimulators. And so they've done 15 minutes of foot bridge on 2 books at home with the electrical stimulation. And after, so MTP flexion iso push on the wall. So a maximal isometric on the wall. So having the MTP in dorsiflex position and just push as hard as they can. So it was basically, these 5 exercise. So yeah, the 5 exercise were really to target only a little bit for sure the arch and the might foot also, but dedicated to improving the MTP flexor. Yeah.
Mm,
So it
got
was
it.
really
Yeah. And I think,
isolated
oh,
protocol, yeah, sorry. Was really, yeah, a kind of very analytically and isolated protocol on the MTP flexor. Yeah.
athletic performance is built on a spectrum of training methods, from high velocity skills to power training to strength work. And on one end of that spectrum, on that strength end, You have the most targeted work in the form of machines. And this is part of the reason that so many top speed and strength coaches have their favorite machines to deliver that targeted stimulus. For decades, Hammer Strength has been a top provider of reliable, effective machines that are trusted by coaches and athletes worldwide. They fit seamlessly into that total performance program, delivering that targeted strength stimulus. When it comes to your machine-based strength training needs, think Hammer Strength. If you want a path to connect the dots of human performance, you can join over 1,000 coaches and athletes who have taken a Just Fly Sports online course. My 5-star review courses include the mini courses Speed ID, as well as Sprint Drills Reloaded. My full-length offerings that are CEU certified include Elastic Essentials and Sprint Acceleration Essentials. To learn more, you can head to justflysports.com/courses and take the next step to level up your human performance knowledge. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, I like just how focused all that was just to that forefoot, just because we talk about, hey, you have to get stronger feet and ankles and all that. But it just highlights the different part and the very specific piece of that. And with the toes as well, I know we'll talk about the outcomes with all the athletic movements and acceleration and jumping and cutting. I was going to ask you as well, is there a way you measure maximal toe strength? Just because I've seen a few different ways of measuring that maximal push. I have in my basement here, I think his name is Tom Michaud. He invented the Toe Pro, and he has this device that you have your foot's on the ground and you put a little, it's like a little piece of plastic that goes under the toes, and then you have a person clamp their toes down and you pull it.
Paper grip.
And it measures how
Paper
much
grip.
force. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's
yeah,
I find that's an illuminating thing. And I don't think it's perfect, but someone who's very weak and someone who's very strong, it's very apparent who's strong and weak. So that's interesting. But I wonder if is there more of a gold standard, or how would you
yeah,
measure that specific forefoot strength?
yeah. That's really a good question because during my PhD defense, the three big application, but number one application of my PhD was how we can precisely evaluate MTP flexion, because we don't have any gold standard so far. So we don't have it's what I say, we don't have an isokinetic for the twos. So we don't have any gold standard. So for me, there is I would say four big things to understand. Number one is that um, being able to evaluate the flexion of the twos, people have a shortcut, like they say that it's the intrinsic strength, but it's not. You can't, I would say, just evaluate the strength of the intrinsic. It's always MTP flexion is always come from the two groups, so extrinsic two flexor and intrinsic. So you can't really, divided your evaluation into intrinsic and extrinsic. So I always mention in all my manuscript on my PhD that was the MTP flexion and MTP flexor, and we know that into these MTP flexors, the extrinsic two flexor are the strongest because they are the biggest. It's pretty simple here. Number two is, if you want to evaluate those muscle, you have to understand that those muscle are pretty sensitive to angle and to dorsiflexion. So changing the angle of the ankle, so putting your ankle into dorsiflexion or plantar flexion, change the force length relationships of the extrinsic to flexor. So if you want to evaluate precisely, you have to be very aware of the position of the ankle first, and on the MTP for sure, because we know that the MTP flexion are, I would say, in terms of the optimal position for force production, it's where you are between 20 and 35 degrees of MTP dorsiflexion. And when you have the ankle in neutral and some amount of dorsiflexion. So that's why you have two joints to be sensitive. So that's why when you want really to be very precise between two sessions, you have to put the same angulation each time, because you can have so many different force production, not just not just because you are stronger, but just because you don't push at the same force length. But that's and I would say the big mistake that I saw with all the things that we can have on social media and on paper so far into MTP flexion is that you really have to block. When I say block, it's really block. You have to stabilize the rear foot, because
Mm.
actually your brain or your triceps or your calf is share the same neural drive than your MTP flexor. So it's really difficult just to push the hard as you can with
Okay.
your toes without having any activation of the calf.
Mm.
But the big thing is it can change totally the force production on your thing. So that's why it's always amazed me the kind of the position where people just put a dynamometer under the tooth without any stabilization and just force on the tooth, is that you have for sure a plantar flexion moment also. And so it's not a really a reliable and valid thing. So um that's why blocking the rear foot, it's also very important for me. It's even more the most important thing when it came to forefoot strength. And it's because it's the same neural drive, so it's the tibia nerve. So yeah, that's I would say what I would say. So you can't divide it between intrinsic, extrinsic to flexor. You have to be at the same angle, and you have to block and stabilize the rear foot, because the calf compensation could be so big.
Yeah.
And even more on weak athletes that will, to push a little bit and after want to rise their heel because of compensation, etc. So yeah, that's mainly the three things that I really try to focus on.
Hmm. That's interesting that the calf can compensate and dig in so much with the toe strength. And I would imagine athletes who have weaker toe flexion values are probably going to constantly be just trying to get the
Yeah,
needed forces from
yeah,
up the chain.
it's
Yeah.
funny to see because
Yeah. I've
on
had it.
our on our custom made ergometer, so we've done so many evaluation, can't remember how many athletes and how many trials, but it's funny to see all the different compensation that we've seen. But the big one was that was, you know, uh, even more not a pushing, it's directly in the rising, like not not having the connection to perform the flexion of the toes, and directly want, to first plantar flex their calf and after producing flexion on the toes. So that's why for some even more weak athletes, it's pretty, we said, difficult to. And that's why also the evaluation that you mentioned just before, so where you have the tools on the ground and you have like the paper grip test, it's the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Can you keep the paper
if your
down?
foot and it's on the ground, and you don't have a stabilization of maybe the ankle on the ground, for you can also cheat a little bit the test by
Mm.
flexing your toes, but having also the involvement of the soleus. And yeah, so that's why really
Yeah.
try to put the foot and ankle on table or on a brick where I know that I can add a rigid belt, or even what we created in the lab was a snowboard fixation, on the foot to really strap usually the complex.
Yeah. I think in the very maybe more the open chain, less clinical world, just watching an athlete do a vertical jump is interesting, because seeing how high or a counter movement jump, watching how high the heel prefers to get off the ground in kind of that propulsive phase, it makes sense with what you're talking about with the angle. like that 20 to 35 degrees, I think you said it was in there,
Yeah.
and that heel lifting basically to create roundabout that angle. And it makes me wonder an athlete with strong toes and good coordination and body awareness is probably going to get that nice best angle naturally to leverage
Yeah.
whatever strength they have through the forefoot in that terminal phase, especially people who are more elastic and bouncy and really, really use their feet versus having more of an engine upstream. And I feel it too. I say that too because I feel that when I do different plyometric exercises as well, where you kind of put your toes at that angle naturally, and it's like, ooh, there's a lot of spring here. I can feel this repeatedly. One of the ones I like is it's called a low squat foot jump, where you're basically in a half squat, and then you're hopping up and down without changing the half squat position, and your heels are always off the ground. That's the big one. And when then it's almost like you're always feeling that angle. I'm making an angle for people who are just listening. So that's why I think
Yeah.
I just kind of feel that happening. But I think a lot of athletes would either just mush through it a little bit, like the heels will come down, or maybe, like you said, maybe they get a lot of it out of the calf and their toes are actually, the toes are maybe just hanging on for dear life at the
Yeah,
bottom
or that
and
that
just,
yeah,
just kind of go along for the ride.
that could be also a lose of anteriorisi anterior anteriorization, sorry, of the center pressure of the force application, and so the heel drop of the ground also because they are much more posteriorly when they contract the ground. So not having confidence with the tools. And what you mentioned, it's pretty right, meaning that uh, dorsiflexion for the MTP or range of motion of dorsiflexion, it's so important. That's why when you have, like hallux valgus, hallux rigidus, turf to injury, where you have
Yeah.
or you can have an impairment of the motion of the tooth, you you change the force length into a less optimal things, and that's also create this kind of inhibition and atrophy that we can have in relation to those pathology, where we know that an abductor hallucis, for example, or the flexor hallucis longus, has really,
Mm.
have this ability to produce when you MTP start to dorsiflex into this range. And when you are fixed hallux or rigid hallux that can dorsiflex, that impair their ability to have a production on force. So that's yeah, a big thing. So mobility of the forefoot will dictate, I will say, your ability to produce force. That's the same for the dorsiflexion of the tibia, for example, where we know that it's allow your calf to also perform optimally or not.
Yeah, it's that I've thought about that a lot more in the last years, recent years, is your ability to produce force being your ability to mobilize and open the space prior. But it's interesting, something like the forefoot, I think we would look at that. It's a lot harder to think about mobility in the forefoot than something that's big and obvious, like hip mobility. If you have bad hip or hamstring mobility, it's pretty obvious. What
Yeah,
what does good forefoot mobility
that's
look
the
like?
body. Yeah, I think in force length relationship, which is the the foundation of all every human anatomy knowledge, was force speed curve, force length relationship, and in force length we forget length, and length is dependent of range of motion. So that's why having also not just hip mobility, but having MTP joint mobility will also or is also a parameter that for sure will dictate your physical output. Yeah.
Hmm. Is that just so? Is that when you're talking MTP mobility or that forefoot? Is that toe, like the toes flexing, like your ability to put your foot on like a slanted board and really lean forward into it and have the toes flex? Is it something within the forefoot itself? Like if I'm using my hands a lot of it, this is audio, but like if I had a foot, like and I'm manipulating the forefoot and the bones, like anything in relation to the structure inside the foot itself, or is it mostly the toes and just the flexion range that you're looking at?
Yeah, for sure. I would say if you have passive range, uh, if you have big passive range of motion, that doesn't mean that you will have the same amount of active range so that you can have the dorsiflexion here. But the first thing is, yeah, I would say, oh, you can improve this is could be could the first thing could be manual therapy or working on manipulating or mobilization of the two to include thing. What I like also, it's kind of chronic stretch or stretch where you dorsiflex the MTP, I would say, to the max amplitude that you have, and you keep this position or this position here. I like to do both, so dorsiflexion of the toes and dorsiflexion of the tibia. So that will work a lot on flexor hallucis longus and digitorum longus flexibility, so they're tendons. So yeah, you can, I would say, improve the articular or arthrokinematic thanks to manual therapy, for example, and mobilizations and much more on the muscle tendon unit, because it's all about the tendon of the flexor that allow you also to have this range here. And after, for sure, it's to be sure that he has actively the ability to flex and extend it within this, I would say, range, because you can have the passive range of motion, but not the active range. Yeah.
So let's dig into the results of the research. So I know we started. I asked you about it, and I I led on a few rabbit trails. Let's dig into, because that premise is so good. Like forefoot strength. We talked about the MTP joint and some of the dynamics there. So let's get into the strengthening of that joint. You talked about the exercises. What impact did that have on, as you mentioned, sprinting, cutting, and jumping?
Yeah. So if we go back to the protocol, so 8 weeks, 2 sessions per week. So the first thing that we wanted to understand is, did we change MTP flexion strength? So what we found is that we basically improved the MTP flexion on the dominant foot and non-dominant foot by approximately 28%, which was pretty very, very important, because it was really high level or highly trained athletes. So,
Oh wow!
28% of improvement, it's pretty impressive. And what we try to do, it's not just a basic statistical analysis and group average. We try also to evaluating the rate of responders. So being a responder, it's to know that your improvement is below you above, sorry, your minimal detectable change that we evaluate during your control period. So every everyone has his own variations, over time. And so to be sure that you improvement or you increment is, I would say, clinically or can be sure, we evaluate this to for every athlete here. And around our protocol, we have 92% of rate of responders. So basically every athletes improve their main TP flexion strengths above the MDC, even more the stronger one. So we basically believe that at the beginning of the protocol, even the guys that already have stronger tools or a really big MTP flexion strength have an improvement that is still valid or relevant clinically. We also have an hypertrophy of those muscle. We evaluate the cross-sectional area of one intrinsic foot muscle and the flexor digitoring longus. And we found also a 10% of hypertrophy after the 8 weeks. So we have a kind of neural and structural effect. So our first result was to say that those muscles, so the MTP flexor, can be trained, I would say, easily like any muscle, and then can improve their strength from a neural aspect and structural aspect, and you can make the foot muscle bigger. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, does it change or did it change the kinetics? And what we found is that around all the explosive tasks that we evaluate, we found that um, for the cuttings, so the change of direction, we have biggest rate of responder into the cutting time. So it was the overall performance. And we can't correlate this improvement by having our responder with a bigger mediolateral ratio of force. So what we found is that um, they have the same amount of force at after the protocol, but the ratio of force, the transmission to the ground was really different. And so in terms of cutting, so people in the training group was able to produce more, I would say, force into the mediolateral direction. So better, I would say, not force production, but force transmission to the ground, so into the direction here.
Mm.
And we wanted, or it could be really explained by the fact that the strike that they used during the night, during our explosive task, were a foot strike. So if we look at the ultimate foot contact when they turn at 90 degrees, for all of our athletes was a 4-foot strike. So for cutting, which we found this, we also found things during a broad jump or horizontal jumping. So it was a counter movement jump horizontally. And we found also an increase of horizontal force production to the ground. So increase of horizontal concentric impulse and ratio of force. And we can also explain this because what changed between a vertical jump and a horizontal jump is that during the horizontal jump, you have an increased dorsiflexion moment. So you have much more bending moment at the toes because you have a forwarding of the body. So you have a center of mass that is moving much more anteriorly. And our explanation around this improvement was that after our protocol, and also because one of exercise of our protocol was to have a heavy load forwarding, or to forwarding, push with your toes and forwarding with your body. What we explain to those results is that after the protocol, we were much more able, to, I would say, forward lean a bit more with your trunk and your body, and to have a much more optimal angulation for your jump here. And the last things that we found, but on small amount of athletes, also because not every athlete did the really big maximal sprint, because for some sport it was not. So for example, handball or basketball athlete was not relevant to do a 30-meter sprint. So it was just rugby, soccer, and track and field athletes. So on the training group into maximal speed. So it was when maximal speed, maximal or kinetics, sorry, during maximal speed, we found that we increase the vertical or the effective vertical impulse, so producing much more vertical force to the ground, which are one of the key things when it came to I will say be performant during maximal speed, is your ability, also to have vertical springness to the ground and vertical force production to allow you to have flight time and etc. So we know that the vertical vector increase or your performance of your sprint is important when it came to maximal speed and when it came to the vertical force production. So that's the the, the three big things that we I will say found, and we didn't find any explanation around what we had some responder, what this guy wasn't a responder, because basically for the most thing it was not correlated with some demographics on some sport. So it was not because of the sport or because of the training volume or even more because of the MTP flexion strengths at the beginning. So what we found sometimes is that you have the same amount of increment of your MTP flexion and the same amount of improvement in your kinetics for some responder, but not for some. So it was very individual things, and actually we can't really explain why I would say you are this particular responder or not. So I think that one of the three big explanation for me is that having a stronger forefoot allow you maybe three big things. Number one is to produce much more mechanical work within the forefoot region. So it's what I call having a greater forefoot producer, or having a stronger forefoot allow you to store and release much more mechanical energy thanks to your MTP flexors. So we know they have long tendons, and we know that they can also, having this, I would say, stretch and shortening cycle action. So it was improving the forefoot spring or the stretch and shortening cycle from the MTP flexor tunnel units. And number three, it's that having a stronger forefoot allow you calf to have a better forefoot transmitter, of have a stable foundation. And we know that having a stronger forefoot can, put your some force of application in much more anteriorly to the ground, and so it increased the ankle gear ratio. So that the three maybe biomechanical explanation around our result. It's forefoot producer, forefoot transmitter, or forefoot recycler, or forefoot spring. Uh, and so I think that the new area or the new knowledge or the new study or the further study, it's really to maybe use the same protocol, but really to perform a 3D biomechanical um, evaluation on all the joint on the foot to understand what you change from a really kinetics perspective, meaning your ankle joint work or ankle joint power, your forefoot joint work on forefoot power, to understand really what we really change uh, precisely inside the foot after this protocol. Because our evaluation or our study, it's not global, but, an overall aspect of force production. So ground reaction force, it's, you don't know when you increase your ground reaction force, you don't know where it's come from. For us, it was maybe from the car, from the forefoot and my foot, but maybe you increase something else. I don't know, the knee or maybe the hip. So the hip has better, joint to transmit its force. So that for me will be the new area of uh, um, understanding around this now.
Yeah. A few things I took from you, Roman, as you were talking, and explaining the cuts and the broad jump, especially, is it made me think about giving athletes more options. So if you have a stronger forefoot and toes, that you may have options to different angles of motion you wouldn't have before. Like you mentioned that broad jump, like you could lean forward more. Was that correct? Like if you had stronger toes, you could actually get a more forward lean. But that, to me, that would strike me as not just being great for a broad jump test, which is more just a combine thing in many cases, or the 1900 Olympics when it was an actual event in track. But there's so many cuts cuts too, but like acceleration situations, little leaps forward, all sorts of motions in sport where you have to really fall forward more. And if you have a stronger, more functional forefoot, you could get into positions that maybe you couldn't if you didn't have that. So I think that and even the cutting I was thinking about, you mentioned with the forefoot, like the moment of change of direction and of course the improved rate of force ratio. But it makes me think as well in cutting, what if those toes strength gives you access to a better foot position in
Yeah,
that turn that you wouldn't have otherwise had the potential access to, and it
yeah,
gives you
uh,
more options. And so, yeah, that I think that's, to me, that's kind of what I was getting out of it as you were talking, is because, like you said, way back in this show, you could also get strength from the calf to do the job, but
yeah,
the forfeit's almost like that's what gives you the options to be more precise with what's actually happening on the ground. And that's probably part of the reason why, like you said, it is so individual, because there's a lot of different ways to solve athletic problems.
yeah. I think you that's brilliant. Yeah, this kind of individual option that you can use. That's a new option, or that's a new skills that you have. And to come back to the cutting, what we know, and it's really it could be related to, for example, um, ankle sprain or chronic ankle instability, where we know that during a cutting movement, we know that the forefoot is biomechanically linked with the rear foot, meaning that we know particularly thanks to now really precise biomechanical study that the flexion of your hallux, so the ability of your hallux to flex on the ground, is related to your inversion of your rear foot. That just means that if I push on the ground with my forefoot and my hallux stay on the ground, that will reduce the ability of my rear foot to invert. So that's mean, and that
Okay.
could be also related to injury of mechanism during a
Oh,
lateral ankle sprain, where you have a forefoot strike and your hallux, you know, totally deviated, and I would say doesn't or escape the ground, and after you have an inversion moment that is traumatic. So I always now think when it came, for example, to um, ankle or rear foot stability, is that uh, when it came to forefoot strike actions, your ability really to your MTP to stay on the ground will offer you, as you mentioned, also stability to put more force on the ground that I would say before the protocol could lead to traumatic things. It was funny to see in some athlete that had some ankle injury to see that they were much more comfortable to put much more mediolateral force on the ground on a forefoot strike that than before. Maybe because of fear, or maybe because they know that if you put too much force mediolaterally, maybe you will have a traumatic thing. So that's also all this link that we can maybe create between your forefoot and your rear foot, and also, as you mentioned, maybe your calf. That is your big motor. But yeah,
Yeah. I think we talked about this exercise last time you were on. And I know you've posted videos on this kind of thing with, like if the feet are on a slant board and you're lifting the heel up, the toes are staying pressed against that board. So they're being
yeah,
flexed under load. Um, one of my favorite exercises is doing like single leg hinge type motions with that front foot or the main foot on that reverse slant board, just to get those toes to have to lengthen under load. And it's interesting, I hadn't put that together with the ankle sprain, where if you can really get the toes on the ground as a function of time, it gives you more time on the ground, and you are more firmly rooted on the ground through the forefoot. Then you don't have to you're less likely to like, have that inversion ankle sprain where you roll to the outside. I hadn't and that's what you were linking, right? Where if you have more flexion through the toes, you can really get into those positions. You're going to be less likely to turn the ankle over on the other side.
yeah. Your first ray flexion related to your inversion of your rear foot. That means that if your first ray stay on the ground, you will have less inversion of your rear foot. So that's a neuromuscular and biomechanical link between those two regions and those two movements. Yeah, so flexion for the first ray and inversion for the rear foot. So that makes sense really. So yeah, if your first ray stay on the ground, you will reduce your inversion moment of your ankle that will maybe turn into a traumatic event. So that's why also, as you mentioned, a board or inking plate that could, work on 3D kind of exercise when you have frontal and sagittal different movement. It's powerful, and it's really important also when it came to foot ankle, robustness and training, where you have to focus on the 3D, because your foot is deformed in the force that it encounter with the ground in 3D is pretty big. It's not just sagittal, it's not just pronation, it's not just supination, etc. It's about many, many things also, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I want to talk a little bit about um, forefoot, very forefoot specific strength. Like as you mentioned, 3 exercises, I had them written down. There, the toe flexion or the MTP flexion, the big toe training, and that incline pogo. Which I was going to say too, that incline pogo. I've seen that a lot in the I guess you could call it the Marinovich style training system here in the States. It's like guys on a super cat, like a jump machine, and they would incline the board. So you're literally just hopping on this machine with like a
Okay.
repeat, like forefoot toe flexion type thing. And I've talked to coaches who think that's a great thing. I've also talked to coaches who don't like it because they think it's maybe too much stress on the Achilles or something like that. Which I think if you're not used to it, it could be. But I when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of that in that kind of training situation. And um, that the Marinovich and then Sports Science Lab is an offshoot of that also does a lot of that. And they get athletes a lot of times there who do a lot more of the traditional weightlifting background, and then they'll start training the foot in that in all sorts of different ways, and they do increase their jumping and athleticism and injury prevention a lot. That's the thing out of that system. It's injury prevention is a big one. Um, Anyways, all this to say, where I was headed and I don't want to trip myself up in my own thought patterns, but forefoot training, so more toe specific versus, not that it is always a versus, but versus like just calf raises or isometric ankle, like a max iso push, or like a spring ankle where you're just doing the isometric and focusing more on the ankle joint than the toes. Is there benefits, or what would the main benefits to toe training versus more of that global foot ankle training be? What situations would you like to do more of one than the other, essentially? If you needed to do more of one than the other, I should say.
Yeah, that's a good question. If we just look at the link between your calf and your forefoot, so I told you that they share the same nerve drive. So it's the tibial nerve. So that just means that your MTP flexion or your MTP joint is really related to your calf. And so that's why I always say that you can be strong on one, so MTP flexion, but weak on your calf. You can be strong on both. You can, etc. So I like to use both kind of exercise, meaning that um, you can really focus on the calf without try to targeting the MTP flexion. So, for example, could be a calf raise where you have your toes outside the ground. So that would be an exercise where you want to, in your heel raises exercise or your calf raise moment, you really want to increase the contribution just come from your calf. Uh, but on the other side, if you do on a calf raise in an incline plate or incline surface, so where you have really a dorsiflexion of your MTP and you do a calf raise, you know that in this exercise, you increase the MTP joint moment and the midfoot joint moment, so you can really targeting most, I would say, we increase the contribution on the MTP flexion. So um, I like to, I would say, try to evaluate analytically the calf and the MTP to understand, do I have to just focus on a calf itself? And I know that he has a standard or a stronger forefoot, or good strong forefoot. So maybe I would say performing calf or calf exercise will be relevant for this athlete. Sometimes is weak on any on the two region, and I have to find exercise where you can isolate those things or work them together. So this exercise in calf raise with dorsiflexion of the MDP, it's pretty relevant. Or sometimes it's really just the forefoot that is weak, as I told you, and that's you really make sense to totally get to the forefoot exercise here. Also, I think because maybe you have some synergy between this, that what we found in the PhD is that all of our exercise uh, didn't lead to calf uh, strength improvement. So even doing
Yeah.
some pogo during 8 weeks or doing some might foot bridge or MTP flexion on the wall and etc. Even this where we know that the calf was activated during our exercise, because I told you it's pretty difficult to walk on the forefoot without, having no activation at all.
Yeah.
So even those exercise didn't lead to calf improvement. So that's just say to me that you can't, that doesn't mean because you walk on the toes that your calf will improve and etc. I think that you really have to maybe have some kind of goals during your session when you say, I'm much more into the calf here, or I'm much more into the forefoot, or I'm much more into both, or I will try to have both this. Um, but I would say I don't know what is the best between these options, or just the calf guys or just the forefoot guys, because at the end, what basically we know is that um, you can be strong on one region and but lose some of this energy within the other one. We know that the big motor within the foot ankle, it's really the triceps shura, but that doesn't mean that because you have a big calf also that you will have a good ankle gear ratio. So I like the idea to say that the ankle gear ratio, so your ability of your calves to have a good lever, it's also really improvement. But if I know that is weak on the calf, I would say that even to think about the lever, just build your calf first, and after we will work to improve also your lever or your leverage, foot leverage here. So yeah, that's I would say my exercise selection came always try to came from assessment and evaluation. Sometime about
Mm,
what is the feeling of my athletes during the exercise, because sometimes it's funny to believe that he will feel those muscle during, for example, a calf exercise, but he will tell you that he feel his arch, or you give a kind of forefoot on arch exercise and he will tell you that he feel his calf. And so that's
yeah,
always what I mentioned, your ability to can change the exercise, or have different variety of things to targeting the right muscles. So it's always that's why just the basic, question, where do you feel the muscle tension or the tension, is one of the
yeah,
uh, most important question when it came to coaching.
yeah, for sure. I find I always want athletes to be able to. Well, I should say this. I always want to find an exercise that lets an athlete feel it in their arch, especially someone who has really weak toes. That to me is always, of course, I want them to feel it in their calf as well. But to me, it seems like that more athletes. Well, tell me what you think about this, Roman. Do you feel that more athletes would have a weak foot intrinsic versus those who have weak just calves? Would that is that true, or do you think is it kind of there's some people with
I
strong feet and weak calf, but like you said, you can't get the intrinsic, the feet, without getting the calf too. So I would imagine there's more people with weak feet than calf structures.
Yeah, that's really a good question, because one of the I would say most question that people ask me is, Romain, do you have any exercise where you can have a feeling under the arch? Because all of my exercise, doesn't give this feeling to my athletes. And so I will say that most of the athletes sometimes doesn't feel the burn under the arch, but maybe it's because it's much more easy to feel burn into all the lower limb muscles. So if you want to feel burn around quadriceps, you have maybe much more exercise,
Oh, he's
or even more, I would say, basic stuff to feel your quadriceps, or even your calf or your hips, or your back or your abdominals, any muscle. So maybe that's why that having, or they believe that they will have the same feeling under the arch. Maybe that's the first things. I would say one of the big things around arch feeling, it's um, try really to so that's why, sorry, to the electrical stimulation under the arch, it's so
oh yeah,
intensive, meaning that all of my students that work with me on the PhD. So they just did one session to feel I would say the protocol, or just they perform just one session and just one the exercise with the electrical stimulation, and just after one session during all the week they have some DOMs under the arch, and for them it was the first time. So just 10 minutes of electrical stimulation under the arch at max intensity, you will have a kind of tetanic contraction that you never had before, and that could be brutal. And that for them being the first time that, oh, okay, now I understand what it is to feel, you know,
Mm.
the arch burning. So electrical stimulation helps to feel things for me, but also to use electrical stimulation in serene position on other muscle that you want that your athlete feels.
Yeah.
And foot bridge, I think foot bridge, when you load your body and you do a forward lean, foot bridge is also a good exercise to feel it. And I think that the, the better one is being in a foot bridge position, but having the toes in dorsiflex position. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's maybe the biggest, or the exercise where you will have much more also some kind of around the plantar fascia, also around the plantar fascia, some um you know strain, like a strain effect, and you will feel also feeling around the arch. So foot bridge, but not having the toes on the ground, but having all the toes in dorsiflex position, and having the unloading position of the right foot is it. It's one of my great or uh, best exercise when I really want athletes to feel the arch, or to really activate all the foot muscle, intrinsic foot muscle, and MTP flexor. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to finish up with talking about, well, something you said about, like if you, again, if you get the toes and forefoot, you're going to get the calf too. And it reminds me of something, Rafe Kelly, is very much a like coach into play, movement training. And one of a quote that he said a long time ago was always try to train at the highest level of complexity that's available. And to me, it would seem that if I could train something that's a little more complex, like think of it like a tree, like you got the root, the trunk, and then the branches. And as you get out from the trunk, it gets more complex. And I think of the body that way a little bit, like the training the forefoot, like you just said, getting the burn in the forefoot, the branches, is harder than the trunk, the quad. That's pretty much, do enough squats and ride a bike or whatever, you're going to get that.
Yeah.
But it's a little more complex. It should, hopefully as simple as possible, but complex to get feeling in the branches. But if you can train that and get the knock-on effect or the effect all the way down the body, it would make sense to focus most of your efforts there for the sake of efficiency or essentialism. Like if I could only do 2 lower leg exercises with my training group, it would make sense to probably do things that would focus on that MTP flexion, versus maybe just doing calf raises and tibialis raises or something. I mean, not that those are bad exercises. But then I was also thinking about just in having options. Like if the toes are strong, you have more options. It's probably going to help you with injury prevention. Versus if I just wanted performance outcomes, like just vertical jump, max vertical jump height or something, maybe it's fine to just then do calf raises. But it would just make sense that if I want to have an essentialist view, that to do the thing that gets everything else anyways, which is toe strength or toe based strength. And like you said, that nerve innervates both, which I think is really fascinating. So if you, I'll ask you this. That was a little bit of me rambling my own thoughts off. I apologize. But let me ask you this to close. Is rehab versus a healthy team that, let's just say they don't have any issues? So you're rehabbing someone versus it's the strength coach and I'm giving some general exercises to a team. What are your thoughts on that athletic performance coach just giving general exercises for the foot and calf and without like a specific injury, or a specific pattern that you're chasing? Do you have any thoughts with that when it's more of a general performance and injury prevention setup?
Well, I will say that uh, the big thing around, kind of want to improve your foot ankle care or foot ankle athletic development is that the foot ankle is pretty so complex, and also you have maybe so many muscle that you can target. So if we talk about the knee, you can say, okay, we will do quadriceps oriented exercise, hamstring oriented exercise. But for the foot and ankle, that you can have so many options. So that's why when I talk with teams and etc., I say, and when it came to athletic development, I say that the basic biomechanical function of the ankle is a kind of triphasic action. So the first thing is you have absorber foot ankle muscle, where you have much more eccentric and isometric actions. After you have the propulsion action, where you have propul- propulsing muscles that have greatest role in run that here. And if we talk about also the foot and ankle, particularly is especially is that they are built for spring. So if you look at the anatomy of the foot ankle muscles, so intrinsic, extrinsic, and the calf, is that they are built for springness, meaning that they have a short fiber length, muscle fiber length, and always long tendon to store and release mechanical energy. So that's what I say to them, that if you want to improve the athletic thing around the foot and ankle, you have to find exercise where it's much more absorbing oriented exercise. And on absorbing oriented exercise, you can have an isolated and analytical approach. So you just focus on the muscle that are the biggest role into the absorption within the foot ankle complex. Or you can have what I can call a coupling approach, where you take the foot and ankle complex as a whole and you work on absorbing exercise. So, for example, could be a right foot landing exercise, for example. The same for the propulsing oriented exercise, and the same for the spring oriented exercise. And for me, that's the best or the holistic things to improve the athletic development. What it changed between the athletic development into a team and me as a rehab coach is that when I rehab someone, is that I have just one guy, I have the time maybe to evaluate those three aspects and to say, okay, with this guy, it's much more into improving this, because this is because of that this his injury came, or he injure is this muscle, so his absorption will be impaired or is already impaired, and we will improve this, and etc. The big thing when it came to teams and athletic development is that you can't perform this holistic evaluation that I created thanks to my PhD, but maybe have this focusing on, okay, maybe we do a mesocycle of just absorbing or foot ankle oriented exercise. For example, I don't know, during 2 months. That doesn't mean that during 2 months you will have m- many sessions, because I really believe that foot ankle muscle have a superpower to improve very quickly, and even more
Yeah.
that other muscle for just the reason that we already talked about, is that the it's less conditioning, or it's really less conditioning, because it was, or it's usually never really work in athlete careers. Yeah. And so that's why I always say to them, when I talk about absorption, propulsion, spring, I say to them, that doesn't mean that you have to have a protocol with, putting 6 hour weeks working just a foot and ankle. That's mean that you focus on this during 2 or 3 months, for example, with specific exercise here, and you will see that this is a kind of region that can improve very quickly and rapidly. And that's what we found in our PhD in MTP flexion, is that we 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 already could have stopped our protocol at 5 weeks, for example. So we did 8 weeks, but what we found is that at week 6, the improvement was at the highest, and after it doesn't change from 6 to 8, and it doesn't change for 8 to day training periods. So I think you can improve very quickly and rapidly if you put the right things. And I really believe that after, even if you stop, it's always funny to when I talk with some physio or SNC, that they are afraid of losing the strength that they have gained. Like meaning that I give you 20% of quadriceps strength, and they believe that after 2 weeks it will disappear. If you stop the protocol. But actually, if you played your sport actively and you engage in your sport, the strengths that you earned after the protocol, basically it will stay a bit the same. It will disappear here. It will maybe disappear or decrease after an injury, or after an immobilization, or after a lockdown period, for example, where you reduce your activity. But that's why, if you go back, yeah, focusing on the triphasic action of the ankle, using exercise on mesocycle and microcycle with this. And you can do a full season foot ankle program with absorption, propulsion, and spring. Or you can say, okay, we will work on those 3 aspects during a week. Also, that after a selection, that it's up to you teams and you context. But yeah, that's always my brainstorming and I will say idea for teams that I work with or consult with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the branches on the tree, those small branches on the end can get up to speed or needed level pretty quick. I think about rock climbing. I rock climb in
Yeah,
the winter, and the first week my fingers are just so weak. But by week 2 or 3 in, they're getting pretty close to how, I mean, they're not as strong as they are after 3 months, but the curve of improvement is very rapid.
that's so
But
fun.
that
Yeah,
first week on the wall is always terrible. It's always terrible.
that's fun. That's
But yeah,
funny. That's funny. The difference between end muscle for rock climbing, where we want our end muscle to be strong, and on the other side, and so the end muscle are dedicated to fine precision and coordination, but they are not really built for force production. But when you do rock climbing, you want to have, yes, the precision of the finger, but a strong also end muscles to be able to grasp things. And the other side, I really see that your foot muscle are dedicated when you see their mechanical property to force production, but people want them to be able to grasp or to do sometimes very complex coordination things and etc. And so very dichotomy between and muscle for rock climbing, where we want to be strong, where we have to be strong. And for me, it should be the same for the foot muscle. It should be strong because they are built, yeah, for that here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could go on about. Well, I was just thinking about how the rock, the people who rock climb for life and how strong their fingers and tendons are. Like, if you are a rock climber, what distinguishes the highest level rock climbers is finger strength to body weight. Like, not even grip. It's almost like pull ups and then grip and then fingers, and it's the fingers that's the elite. But that's like a lifetime of just being on the wall and slow build. And that makes me think about too what you were talking about earlier about the force storage through the forefoot and volume over time and those types of
Yeah,
things. But relative to like just, hey, general workable forefoot intrinsic strength that is going to help us get into better positions. That not needing as much time to shore up, which I think is important. I also was thinking too, if you have it, then you can go play your sport and you're using it. Like, every time you cut, you're
yeah,
using that improved piece that you got. And I think we're always very hung up on, oh, like, this has got to be in the program forever. Keep adding more, keep adding more. Well, what
yeah.
if I can just do the essential to maintain what I have? And isn't that the goal, really? Because we want to be able to play and you put our investment in what moves the needle for our actual sport. So, yeah, I fascinating stuff, Roman. Well, hey, I think I've actually run out of time here, and I have like a whole page of notes crammed down and a half page of questions I didn't get to ask you, but I will save them for next time. And just this, I love this topic. You're doing such great work, and it's really cool to hear about your PhD. Awesome. Whenever the next research projects come out as well, my ears will be tuned for when those are out. So, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank Joel. Always a pleasure. And yeah, I think we answered 3 or 4 questions on the 10 or 12 questions that we put on the paper. But yeah, that's why I can come back to a post 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good.